All right, good morning and welcome to our channel. This will be our second video on this topic. Unfortunately, I made a mistake with the prior video with no sound, so hopefully you can hear me pretty clear today. So, what's going on in the news right now is they're dealing with Los Angeles and the misuse of billions in homeless funding. And so, what's happened is the administration has cut up the funding to LAHSA, at least that's the way I call it, the Los Angeles Housing Authority, and its respective program for homeless funding. So, I want to go over some of the details today to kind of cover what's happened and how the funding may have been kind of missiled through the city. So, on the summary, on June 11th of 2026, the Trump administration, the Department of Housing and Urban Development, better known as HUD, announced that it was suspending federal funds to the Los Angeles Housing Authority, better known as LAHSA, while federal investigators examine allegations involving financial management, fraud, conflicts of interest, and possible misuse of taxpayer funds. What's ultimately changed is HUD immediately suspended participation in certain federal programs for funding. So about half of them, basically, pending the outcome of the investigation. The decision affects one of the nation's largest homeless agencies, which coordinates homeless services across Los Angeles County and administers large amounts of federal continuum of care funding. The action itself, according to HUD, can include false certifications made on the federal government, weak financial management and internal controls, failure to maintain required conflict of interest safeguards, potential violations of federal grants and requirements, ongoing Inspector General investigation, which is OIG, alleged misuse of taxpayer funding, poor documentation of federally funded housing programs, and previous findings of fraud by a judge in litigation involving homeless programs. The allegations cited by HUD are that Lacia's former CEO approved more than 2 million in federal funding connected to her husband's nonprofit, leading to a conflict of concerns and her resignation. As a president, I want to say that at one point there were 924 employees. In a week's time, more than half of them supposedly have been retired, but it seems to me that a lot of them left because that building was involved in an incredible fraud, in my opinion. When we talk since 2021, more than a billion stolen, and a lot of the funds and operating sites. So it looks like they had close to 2,300 housing sites. They were responsible for, many of which were tied to political constituents as well as family and friends. So they funneled like a syndicate the money through friends and families and fake LLCs and different things. And so HUD cites the findings that government funds were allegedly used improperly under overlapping contracts. And as an example, when we look at having somebody mow the grass, but they're billing twice for it. So you see the problem there. Early audits found poor tracking of housing placements because many of these motels were kickbacks, right? So they put people in really bad hotels and then they charge, Hilton diamond rates, right? And so this backdoor gambit and almost like mafia activity went on and stole approximately $500 million. Required internal conflict of interest policies were not in place until late 2025, despite federal certification requirements. Of course, HUD's position, Scott Turner said that the department intends to fund organizations that demonstrate measurable results and accountability, saying taxpayers' dollars should not continue funding and agencies that fail to properly manage public money. So I will tell you this, guys. In terms of looking at this in the whole case of more than $1 billion, they're probably not going to continue to fund LACIA anymore. We're already seeing the collapse of that agency with more than a loss of 50% of their employees. And we expect those numbers to continue to grow because when they depend so solely on the funding and half of it's gone, and now they're looking at further investigations into their housing choice voucher program. And that does also include all the ties I had to all these LLCs claiming to be nonprofits throughout the city that actually didn't help that many people. So we have fraud, basically saying people are going to permanent supportive housing and hotels and kickbacks and deals, double billing. And so the reality of it is the Los Angeles Housing Authority is run more like a syndicate. And they stole approximately At least now, preliminary results are suggesting close to $500 million, where they funneled it through bad agreements with hotels and a lot of this will kind of rolled out through the administration where your upper level management, you have friends and family that owned a lot of these structures. And so you see this, they were using federal funds to enrich and engorge yourself and family and friends and other constituents. It doesn't necessarily mean it's political constituents, but by far, only looking at how much they were spending, it was 170,000 per homeless person, but yet really nobody got anything other than tents on the sidewalk and RVs wrapped around the city. And that's largely because this agency stole a vast portion of it. Whatever wasn't stolen there was kickback from other agencies claiming to be nonprofits and so on. And so we're probably going to see receivership of the agency or a complete dissolution of it. Because I don't believe they can be trusted anymore, and I don't think that HUD's going to agree to do business with them anymore. And this isn't the first time. I mean, they've already been indicted once in a federal court for fraud. This is a second go round, and so I can tell you that they're. I can tell you HUD and probably administration are looking for a new agency to take this over, and there will be a high level of accountability because we can't, taxpayers can't continue to fund billions into a system, and that's not including what the state taxpayers of the state of California poured into this, which would be a additional 15 billion. And so wild amounts of money went into servicing basically the people that work there, the upper administration and so on. And in the end, they managed to steal eye-watering amounts of money. And so let's go over some of the budgets. So they spend half that money on permanent supportive housing. The problem with that is when we discuss permanent supportive housing, rapid rehousing, and subsidies is a lot of the properties they were owned and managed by them. And so you see they kept the money in the family and they overbilled and double billed for it. And so we end up with a circumstance where a tremendous amount of money was stolen. Not many people really got much. And those that did receive some form of housing received it through really bad hotels charged at extreme premium rates. And so because there was virtually little oversight of this, they really did operate with impunity for nearly half a decade. But it appears now that OIG is involved, as well as the court system and the feds. I think that there will be a large number of indictments, and with half the employees disappearing in within a week, says is a clear message. You know, this is not people getting their walking papers. These are cockroaches spreading the minute you kick the light on and start a federal investigation. People trying to get the fuck out of town, cash in all the money they've made off this deal. And so it's my hope that the feds will not only alleviate the positions of these people and close down this agency, but also take federal prison buses and roll them up to all these nonprofits that have spent anywhere from a half a decade to a full decade, basically fleecing the U.S. government as well as California taxpayers of money, and then claiming that they're servicing people when in fact the stark contrast of all these homeless out on the streets were really never being served. And the service that was granted was so subpar that you probably wouldn't have treated a dog that way. And so now we see why that never really worked. And so that's too many handshake deals behind closed doors. You've got a complete corrupt administration, and you have a bunch of criminals working all in one building. And between kickbacks and other things going on, it helped nonprofits and the staff basically gorge themselves on $1 billion. I can't think of how else you take a staff from 940 employees down to nearly half overnight. I mean, people are already, it seems like you've got employees already booking flights to North Korea and Cuba, trying to sell everything they can because this is what they've done. And so I can tell you the circumstances will be quite dire. The complication to this will be that the city of Los Angeles isn't going to have much funding right now uh, for any of it because they cannot trust the people that were put in charge of this. And I believe this is going to be the final stroke for that agency. I look at this video as an update because I think the final sweep will be all the nonprofits because likely once they complete their investigation of this particular agency and either dissolve it, put it in receivership or just completely defund it to get rid of it, then likely they're going to move on to nonprofits. And so there will be hundreds, if not thousands, of investigations of theft and fraud through places claiming to give out food and different things when in fact they didn't do shit. They took federal funds. They especially targeted that during the pandemic when money was rolling out in every state through the federal level. So they stole eye-watering amounts of money. And I think that this is a final victory, I think, in terms of shutting this whole syndicate down. It never worked, and because it never reached the homeless, and that's a big problem. So while it's going to create some detriment for the city of Los Angeles, they're already seeing a reduction in homelessness out there because many of the homeless are just leaving. It's preferable to be somewhere else. Uh, and that's part of the reason why there was such a big problem out there. We had too many people stealing the money, and so you look into these investigations, and now they've lost funding. It's only probably a matter of a week before they go after the housing choice vouchers out there that were issued probably improperly, and a lot of staff probably owning these properties, and then they're kicking back on the rates. And so you see it's just been a wild amount of fraud out there. And so the only way you can really rebuild this is with a new agency that is not controlled by any form of LACH or the Los Angeles Housing Authority. They've been very bad stewards of federal funds. So I hope to make one last video, I think probably in October, regarding this matter. And that's way we can identify the mugshots of the employees, probably over 500 that will likely be arrested or indicted one way or another for the fraud, including most of the administration. And then, of course, look at what's happened with the housing choice voucher, and then take a look at how many nonprofits. And it looks like a lot of the nonprofits were actually functionally ran by people that were not even U.S. citizens. In other words, they found a way to capitalize during the pandemic while the government was sidetracked. And so a lot of these nonprofits that engorged themselves on funds were directly related to kickbacks. And so what's happened here is this whole thing is just dirty now. I mean, I don't even, if I, I'm not the federal government, I'm not, the HUD, but I can tell you that at this level of fraud, I don't believe that they can continue to fund this agency whatsoever. I don't think they can be trusted at any level. I don't care what kind of hiring practices they have. They've demonstrated not once, but twice fraud at a massive scale. And so I think that will likely be the end of that agency. And I'm curious to see what solutions the government puts in place. Clearly, something the city will have to consider is doing this, but they're going to have to follow a lot more oversight going in the future. And I think that most people that probably work for that agency now do not have a future, at least working there in the future, because it's sometimes when the well has been poisoned, you simply cannot trust that agency anymore. People that deal with that agency for housing, I would recommend strongly that you seek out legal counsel, because many of you, I find, that probably have been affected by their policies were you probably had your rights violated in many ways. And so just be careful dealing with that agency. They've demonstrated a high level of fraud. Even the US government's had to intervene. And at this point, I can say that this is little more than a Ponzi scheme operating out of that building. And I don't think anybody should trust anybody that works there, that's directly tied to the administration. Because look what's happened here, you know. So the investigation will continue with OIG, Department of Justice. I figure there should be some updates nationwide pretty soon in regards to what they're going to do. And honestly, after two tries, maybe you could argue that it was mismanagement to begin with, but this is the second go around with this agency. And so I don't believe there's any continued future for them. So let me get on the comments here. Let me close up the video. I just want to bring you a quick update that for once in Los Angeles history, you're probably going to watch one of the largest housing agencies in the country outside of New York probably fall. I don't see why there's any point in keeping it. And I would imagine that it would probably be dissolved at this point. There's just nothing left that can be trusted. Moving on back down, let's see here. Michi, good morning. Double C, good morning, sir. Preppy Princess, good morning to you. Muskogee Land J, everyone's talking about 2032 robot and AI apocalypse. Of course they are. AI is involved in everything. And the more you have agencies doing things like this, it's going to expedite the use of AI. This administration has done a fantastic job of identifying fraud within the system, especially dealing with housing authorities that operated with impunity. Since AIs don't have a vested interest in property, money, and into engorging itself in federal funds, then it may be a better use of our time and federal funds to let AI weed out these bad actors, including housing authorities that have operated with impunity for if a decade, possibly longer in some cases. Sullivan, good morning, 2030. And yep, I think that a lot of AI is going to be rolled out through the system before we ever reach 2030. Look at the breathtaking amount of money that we're seeing that's being stolen by supposed housing authorities and its employees and staff. And so this is only going to expedite the process of rolling out AI for applications and determinations at a lightning pace. And it's probably good news. It isn't going to be good news for everybody because not everybody trusts AI. And I get that. People didn't trust personal computers when they came out. People didn't trust the internet when it came out. People didn't trust smartphones when they came out. We can always argue something, right? And so USA Army vet says, I'm living on a slumlord building who owes 100,000 back in building code violations. That sounds pretty serious. So he may end up losing that building over that. Claire Underwood, I love that name because it reminds me of the House of Cards. I like your signage. Yeah, I did get a new sign finally because it's hard as a company on YouTube these days to market any services that we have because they run so many ads on top of these videos that I make that I literally have to post a sign literally in my office. So if you guys ever need help, I worked at 26 years at the federal level helping people with housing and resolve matters with PHAs and bad landlords. You can always reach out. You can see our phone number, but we don't take text, our website, and of course, email address there. My office should be a last solution, not a first solution. If all other results to resolve your problem have not yielded any result for yourself, then you should reach out to my office. And I'm also very inexpensive. Moving on from there, Sheila Neal, this is ridiculous. This is decades of mess. It is. And we're having to unwind this in almost every city. LA just being a shining example. We indicted 90 more out of the New York NYCHA Housing Authority. And so we may see the decade of the defunding of housing authorities because they simply cannot seem to operate without committing fraud or violating people's First or Fourth Amendment rights. A problem that AI doesn't seem to have yet. Daniel Beluga, thank you for all the emojis and so forth. Hot sugar. We couldn't hear things. We couldn't hear. Your things are changing. Sorry about the last video, guys, about 30 minutes ago. When you get older, you forget about things like tapping the on button on a microphone. I get frustrated myself with that. Claire Newwood, thank you for all the emojis. Well, guys, I'm going to wrap this up. This wasn't intended to be a very long video, but we shall have a parade of people as we watch the Los Angeles Housing Authority go down. Half its employees have left. They've clearly, at the federal level, been proven to steal a vast portion of money. There's a lot of people in very serious trouble right now, and the future of the Los Angeles Housing Authority, in all respects, is in question at this point. If they will ever be permitted to carry on business as usual, I don't think there's a future for them anymore. I think everything's tainted. It's just kind of like poisoning the well. You really can't operate out that building with any of its employees without knowing nationwide that they have been accused of fraud multiple times by a federal judge. And here we go again. And so that's where we stand with it. We just simply cannot trust the people that are managing federal funds. So HUD has to step in. People are going to end up receiving a prison sentence for it. And what really grabs me is the fact that half the employees vanish a week after this goes live. Not my video, but the topic itself. They went from 900 employees to they're pushing only 500 right now. It's only been a week. You see? So when you have a thief in a house, breaks in the house in the dark and you snap the light switch on, the roaches always scatter. And so whether the federal government closes that housing authority or they have to close because they ain't got any employees left is yet to be seen. But I can tell you, when the shit hits the fan and they all have to stand before a federal judge, there's going to be a lot of people they're going to have a concerning future, and it may not be in this country, or it may be in a penitentiary. I hope they select Sam Quinton. They've always got vacancies there, right? So looking on down, a few last comments here. Infinite possibilities, money mismanaged all the time. So much fraud in LA. Claire Underwood goes, I noticed that you're not happy in LA HUD. That's how it goes. Well, guys, I've enjoyed talking with you. I'm going to share some of the details in the comment section down there as well as our live comments and a description of the video if you'd like to look further in this matter. And I encourage all of you to look into this personally. Don't just take my word for it. Go out there and take a look at what's happening with LAHSA and the Los Angeles Housing Authority. I've enjoyed talking with you. We hope to see you again. We're going to be talking about portability next. Try to help you guys work through your portability issues. Maybe you don't want to live in Los Angeles anymore. You'd like to take your voucher or your subsidy and go and move to a different county or state. That's what we're going to discuss in our next video, and that should be in about one day. Okay, it's great having you. Y'all have a great day. Bye bye for now.